Grace, mercy, peace. Can you imagine the almighty ruler of the universe gives those things to you and to me because he wants to? May God's grace and peace wash over you anew and afresh this morning as we consider the Old Testament citing of God, that our God is a glorious God. And oh my, did we see it in our readings, huh? Have you ever had one of those experiences where you just thought, until I saw it, I really had no idea? You know what I'm talking about? I've had a number of those in my life. Share just a couple of them real fast so you understand where I'm going with this. I'd had people tell me how amazing Yellowstone National Park was. And as they would tell me about it and explain about the geysers and the hot water pool things or whatever those things are called, I don't even know what they are, I could get this sense of, wow, this must be pretty cool, this must be pretty amazing, et cetera, et cetera. But then a few years ago, because son John vicared out in Montana, we took a trip out to Montana and we went and we saw Yellowstone. And I had to just say, I had no idea. The pictures, the descriptions, none of them could really capture it. I had to see it. Had experiences like that? Do you guess that the people in our three readings might have all said, I had no idea? Think about those Israelites coming out of Egypt. Now, they've seen the glory of God several times in a whole bunch of ways already. There have been the 10 plagues there in Egypt. They've journeyed to the Red Sea with the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire guiding them by day and by night. God's opened up the Red Sea and taken them through. But do you think all of that might have kind of paled in comparison to when they got to Mount Sinai? Oh man, this is spectacular. The trumpet blast blowing louder and louder and louder. Smoke coming out of a kiln, billowing up across the mountainside. The whole mountain shaking and trembling. The voice of God speaking. Do you think they might have said, oh wow, we had no idea? I'm guessing that could be the case. Or how about Ezekiel? He's off in exile with the exiles from Babylon. And all of a sudden, for whatever reason, God comes to him in a vision. And the first thing Ezekiel sees are angels. And the angels themselves are amazing. The angels have 4 faces. They have the face of an eagle, an ox, a human being, and a lion. I forgot which 4. By the way, you'll see those same 4 on the corners of our cross because those became the 4 pictures or the 4 symbols for the 4 Gospels for whatever reason. And these angels are speeding back and forth, and their legs are described as wheels intersecting wheels. What is a wheel intersecting a wheel? I don't know what a wheel intersecting a wheel is. Nobody does. So artists picture it all kinds of different ways. We're told that fire was popping out from amongst them and lightning was flashing out from outside of the fire and flashing back and forth. And these were just the angels. And their sound was like the tumult of an army. And then above the angels, there was this pavement-like looking thing. And on the pavement was this sapphire throne, lapis lazuli, sapphire, whatever. We're not exactly sure how to translate it. And there was a figure on that like that of a man. And from the bottom down, from his waist down, it just looked like glowing fire. Can you imagine Ezekiel thinking, wow, I've never seen anything like this. Nothing even close. What do you think? Do you and I underestimate the glory of God? Do you and I underestimate the grandeur of God? And then there's Job. Job, who had gone through so much. He loses all his stuff in one day. Everything. And then he loses all his kids, all 10 of them, on one day. And Job's response is, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Wow, amazing. And then Satan attacks his health and his skin becomes covered with boils. And again, he first of all responds with wonderful faith. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. But eventually all the suffering just wears Job out. And he begins to complain. And he curses the day of his birth. And he demands that he have a hearing before God. I want to plead my case. You're not treating me right. You're not treating me fairly. You're not treating me justly. I should have a chance to plead my case before you. And what's God's answer? Were you there when I laid down the foundation of the earth? Were you there to hear the angels sing as I set the foundations of the universe? Have you gone to the abode of death? Can you lead the light out of the storehouses? Surely you know. You're so old. Surely you were born already when all that happened, right, Job? This goes on for about 2 chapters. We only gave you about 10, 12 verses. And at the end of those 2 chapters, Job goes, yeah, you're right. I didn't know. I didn't understand. I'm sorry. And then God goes on for a couple more chapters. How often, like Job, don't we question God's guidance of our life? How often, like Job, don't we have this conception of God that somehow God ought to answer to us? And that we should determine how our lives should run. Do we underestimate the grandeur and glory of God? How would you and I have reacted had we been in the shoes of any of those people in any of those 3 readings? Mount Sinai, with that trumpet blast blasting louder and louder. What did the people do? They trembled in terror. I think I would have too. Because what would I have seen about myself? What would you have seen about yourself? We'd have seen how awfully small we really are. How incredibly insignificant we are on our own, by nature. How weak we are in comparison to the grandeur and glory of God. And worst of all, how sinful we are. And how much we deserve God's condemnation to hell. Do we underestimate the glory, the grandeur of our God? I know I do. You too? This week we're going to celebrate Christmas. We've already kind of started a little bit with our choir pieces. We're going to joy to sing about peace on earth and silent night and O little town of Bethlehem. And we're going to joy to see a baby wrapped in cloths and placed in a manger. But let us dare not forget who that baby is who's wrapped in cloths and laying in that manger. That's God. That is the same great, grand, glorious God who thundered and lightened and trumpet blasted Mount Sinai so that creation itself was shaking. That's the great, grand, glorious God who sat in that throne in Ezekiel's vision, who spoke to Job, who created the universe. And can you imagine? That great, grand, glorious God was willing to become a baby wrapped in cloths so he could walk to a cross for you and for me, so he could rise from the dead for you and for me, could win eternal salvation for you and for me. And now we have this whole new look at the grandness and glory of God. Rather than us having to stand at the foot of Mount Sinai shaking and trembling and scared, we get to look at it and say, I have a God who is great and glorious. My God is the God who rules the universe. My God is the one who set the foundations of the universe and causes all of nature to work. I have a great and a glorious and a grand God who can and does rule all of history for the good of his people. And look at his grandness and his glory. This is amazing. And because he's so powerful and because he's so amazing, I can have the absolute confidence of knowing that my God can and will direct my life, so that I stay on the road to life eternal. And someday that very best day of your life is going to come. That day when you close your eyes in death and you open those eyes back up again to see the face of the grand and glorious God. Job said, with my own eyes, I will see him. And you will too. When we get to heaven, will we be able to see all of God's glory? We'll find out when we get there. I'm pretty confident in saying we'll be able to see a whole lot more of God's glory there than any human being can possibly see here. Because you will have been washed clean of all sin. It will have been removed from you permanently and forever. Yes, you will be able to see at least a good chunk of God's glory. And I just wonder if you and I might shake our heads in amazement and say, wow, I had no idea. Amen? And amen.